Today, on Campfire Stories, we are going to listen to a true story that is yet to be solved. Be it a story of an innocent man caught up in something much larger than him, or a secret agent working with the government to uncover something heinous. That is for you to decide. This is the story of Charles Morgan. Unexplained mysteries. True crime. This is Campfire Stories. To give you some background on him, Charles was a 39-year-old man who lived in Tucson, Arizona. He was the president of an escrow agency. Now, I believe this to be important for the story. For those of you who don't know, an escrow agent is somebody who holds property or money, acting as a safe third party to transfer those funds for another person. Now, Charles was a creature of habit. He'd always come straight home from work, no matter what. One day, he didn't come home from work. I'd assume at this point his family was calling the company trying their hardest to get a hold of him. So his wife reported him missing to the police. 3 days pass, and there's still no sign of Charles. That is very odd. Now that night, something did happen. While his wife and children slept, the silence of the night was broken by banging on the back door of their house. Ruth went to check the ruckus and found Charles in very bad shape on the back door. He's an absolute mess. Shoes missing, broken zip ties around his ankle, and his hand still bound in zip ties. Now at this point, we'd all be worried being in Ruth's position. Your husband, after being inexplicably missing for 3 days, just shows up beat to heck? Obviously in distress. The ordeal wasn't over yet. Charles gestured towards her throat repeatedly. She eventually brought him a pen and notepad. He began to scrawl out a very bizarre story. Now Charles, he claimed to have been kidnapped and tortured by unknown assailants. Through the torture, they applied a hallucinogenic drug to his throat which he claimed would either drive him insane or kill him outright. It apparently affected his nervous system. He couldn't speak as it would kill him to swallow that which coated his throat. He then asked Ruth to hide the car around back. Ruth protested and insisted they take him to the hospital. He responded very firmly, "No." Ruth was frantic, to which Charles responded, "They'll kill me." Ruth continued to question Charles. Who is they? Charles remained vague, but he says he's worked for them for about 3 years. Implies that he was working for the feds as an agent, combating organized crime probably. The mob was known to be active in Tucson at the time, and Charles had occasionally hinted at his wife that he had personal knowledge of it. But the less you know, the better, is what Charles wrote. Now we fast forward in time a little bit. Over time, Charles has slowly regained his ability to speak, but he's become increasingly and intensely paranoid. He's always checking outside to make sure he's not being watched, looking behind his back. He even started carrying a gun on him and a bulletproof vest at all times. He even grew a thick beard to try to hide his appearance. Eventually, he told his wife that he was working as an agent for the United States Treasury Department, which, if you remember when we go back to the start, him working as an escrow agent, or at least owning his own escrow company, that does point to him possibly working with some people who were sharing money with each other who may have not been so good, which could have landed him in all this trouble. Now, his work with the Treasury Department apparently involved real estate fraud and money laundering, and he was investigating the mafia who was operating in Tucson around the time of his disappearance. He was testifying against two major groups, the Ned Warren family and the Joe Bonanno family. And he told his wife, "If anything ever happens to me, I've left a letter behind that explains everything." Now let's fast forward a little bit more. One day, Charles was dropping his daughters off at school. And let me remind you, he has 4 daughters. And he does this every single morning. And I know this is a total huge personal risk to him. But he's afraid of somebody, one of these families, possibly hurting his daughters while they're being dropped off by their mother at school or by the bus. And he cannot have that happen. So he drops the girls off one day, and he just never returns. And this is the last time that he will never return. Around the time of his second disappearance, Ruth called the cops again. She also begins looking at the letter Charles told her about, the one that explains everything. It never turns up. Then Ruth receives very strange phone calls. It's a woman. She won't reveal her name, just calls herself Green Eyes. Before she hangs up, she says, Chuck is alright. Ecclesiastes 12:1-8. Ruth is confused by this. She then grabbed her Bible and looked up the verses, but it did not make any sense to her. Now, to go and save you the trouble of having to go and find a Bible, pick it up and type in Ecclesiastes 12:1-8, I'll just go and help you and read those out right now, as they are very important to the story. Ecclesiastes 1-8 are as follows. 1. Remember now thy Creator in the days of youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. 2. While the sun, or the light, or the moon, or the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after rain. 3. In the days of the keepers of the house shall tremble, and the strong men shall bow themselves, and the grinders cease because they are few, and those who look out the windows be darkened. 4. And the doors shall be shut in the streets, and the sound of the grinding is low. And he shall rise up at the voice of the bird, and all the daughters of music shall be brought low. 5. Also when they shall be afraid of which is high, and fear shall be in all way. And the almond tree shall flourish, and the grasshopper shall be a burden, and all desires shall fall. Because man goeth to his long home, and the mourners go about the streets. 6. Or ever the silver cord be loosed, or the golden bowl be broken, or the pitcher be broken at the fountain, or the wheel be broken at the cistern. 7. Then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return unto God who gave it. 8. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. All is vanity. Now, 2 days after he went disappearing for the second time, Chuck's body was found. He was shot dead along a remote dirt road, approximately 40 miles away from his house. He was shot dead in the back of the head. That sounds pretty bizarre, right? Firstly, Charles was wearing his bulletproof vest, so if he got hit in the chest, it probably would have caught the first or second or third bullet. But whoever killed him shot him in the back of the head. That sounds like a hit. Now, he had his knife, he had his gun, as well as other firearms and ammunition in his car. This guy was packing and ready for a fight. And the firearm he was carrying had also recently been fired, but the gunpowder marks from the shot were found on his left hand, even though Charles was right-handed. So either Charles was forced to go and shoot with his left hand, or he was caught off guard, reached for his firearm with his left hand instead of his dominant hand, and tried to get off a couple of shots before he was actually put down himself. But the weird part about his gun is that the gun had been wiped of all fingerprints. And in fact, the entire car had been wiped of fingerprints. There wasn't even his. There was not even Chuck's fingerprints on it. Charles' fingerprints on it. None at all. And in the back seat, they found one of Charles's teeth wrapped in a white handkerchief. And in the passenger seat, a pair of sunglasses that didn't belong to Charles. There was also a map that Charles drew by hand, and it led to the very spot where he died. Then the cops made one last discovery. Clipped inside of Charles's underwear is a $2 bill. On this bill is written Ecclesiastes 12:1-8, as we read earlier. The bill also contains some references to Freemasonry along with 7 Spanish names: Acevedo, Bejarano, Cairo, Duarte, Encinas, Fuenta, and Gradias. On the back, the names and signers of the Declaration of Independence are numbered 1-7, and a map leading to the town of Robles Junction in Cela City. All the cops are stumped. So you know what they do? They rule a dude getting shot in the back of the head as a suicide. I mean, all's well that ends well, right? I mean, sorta. Not long after Charles's body is found, Green Eyes, remember who called her and originally told Ruth about Ecclesiastes? Green Eyes turned up again. This time, she did not contact Ruth. She calls up the local police station and tells them she spoke with Charles before he died. According to Green Eyes, she and Charles met up at a local motel. Charles showed Green Eyes a briefcase stuffed with money. Now that's odd. Again, comes up with the escrow. What was he doing as an escrow manager? What was he doing working with the feds? Which federal branch was he working with? And Charles showed Green Eyes a briefcase stuffed with money. He claimed that it was to buy out a hit that had been put on him by the mob. So the mob did put a hit out on him, and he was going to try to pay off the hitman. He was on his way to the desert to meet with the hitman and buy him off. That's a stupid idea. Green Eyes believes that instead the hitman took the money and killed him anyway. And that makes 100% sense. Think of Occam's razor. I'm going to go and meet a hitman who's paid to kill me with money. He's going to kill me and take the money. But it's interesting. But of course the cops can't corroborate it. So what do? What can they do? Meanwhile, Ruth is contacted by two men. They claim to be FBI agents. Now, you do not let spooks inside your house, first rule. But when Ruth invites them inside, they begin tearing the place apart, apparently looking for something, possibly that note he left. They leave clearly frustrated and have not found nothing. By this time, an investigative journalist has picked up the story, Don Devereux. He claims to have uncovered evidence that Charles has indeed testified in secret state investigation against the mafia. But when he contacts the FBI for more info, they claim to have never heard of Charles Morgan, much less worked with him. Which is weird because when you make a FOIA request, you're supposed to respond to you. But it's just like they do to UFOs. They try their best not to respond to you. Devereux went on to say, I made a Freedom of Information Act, i.e. FOIA, to request to the FBI. And they claim never to have heard of Mr. Morgan, despite the fact they were obviously open an investigation. And despite the fact that they interviewed Mr. Morgan's attorney. They were all over this like a blanket for a while. But now they've never heard of this guy. He never even existed. No card, no file, no nothing. Now, here is very weird. Devereux's investigation would lead him to a man named Donnie Casolaro, who agreed to share secret info on what Charles had been up to. But before the meeting takes place, guess what? Casolaro winds up dead in a motel room. 12 cuts to his wrist. The police just ruled it another suicide. And shortly thereafter, a man named Doug Johnson dies. And would you have to believe it, but Doug Johnson worked across the street from Devereux, and he was found shot dead in his car. Now, Johnson's car and Mr. Devereux's car are the exact same make, model, and color of car. Now, Devereux believed it was a failed hit, either by the FBI or the Mafia. But as far as anyone knows, it was the only attempt. And as the $2 bill that Mr. Morgan left, Devereux likely believed it was a code that unlocked a message hidden in a document, possibly the letter that those FBI agents, FBI, totally FBI agents were looking for in Ruth's house. But sadly, that document has never turned up. Now, thank you so very much for listening to our first campfire story. I welcome you to our channel. I hope to improve the content as we go along forward. I hope you like and subscribe, leave a comment, and make sure to let me know of any unexplained mysteries, stories that you would like read on this channel. I love aliens, I love mysteries, I love anything with a good conspiracy about the federal government. Well, anyways, welcome to Baffle Vagnus. I hope you have a very beautiful day.